Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for having me, Ryan. We've worked together in a couple different spaces and capacities, so I'm happy to be in conversation with you today. Thank you for this work. I feel like it's really important. I like to think of photographers as memory keepers, archivists, and even photojournalists, regardless of what you might consider yourself as, because I think cameras are one of the most powerful tools. You're documenting life in your community, memories, monuments, and people become memorialized and a part of history through your lens. Without cameras, memories are just memories, buildings and people, all of it's ephemeral. So photographs have proved to stand the test of time. You've documented everyday moments in your community, special events for your peers, milestones, and so much more. And I'd like to thank you for the work that you do, preserving collective experiences, telling your story and the ones around you. So I'm grateful to be here and ask you some more questions.
Thank you. I
So,
appreciate that. Thank you so much.
of course.
And I'm happy to have you as well.
With that being said, as an artist first, because you have expressed yourself through your merch and even in the past as a musical artist, fun fact for those that didn't know,
Definite fun fact.
why is your chosen medium photography? And do you believe as a Black photographer you have a moral obligation to capture Black life in Cleveland?
Okay. So my chosen medium being photography, I think that is really just because it was a natural calling for me. My journey as a photographer started initially in high school, developing, taking photos on a film camera, developing them in a dark room, and it grew from there to me just having a passion for it. As technology grew and smartphones evolved and they had cameras built into them, I found myself taking pictures of things most people do, but just from a different, unique POV, or always wanting to make sure it was the best photo. So early on, people always told me, oh, you have an eye for it, and again, just always wanting to document things. So I think you can have a camera phone or anything else. If it's not in you to, document it, it's really not in you. And as far as the second part of that question, do I feel as a Black photographer I have a duty? Repeat the question for me, or just that last part?
Moral obligation to capture Black life.
A moral obligation. I absolutely do, 1,000%. As you mentioned, kind of in your introduction, photography or photos basically tell a story, their history. Without photos, all we really have is memory. So I felt early on it was kind of my duty basically to, in some instances, change narratives. One being about Black fatherhood. I know from when I grew up, it was very normal and customary to be an absentee dad, but I've watched my generation where that narrative has totally shifted. So, that was one of my initiatives early on as a photographer with a project that I had to simply highlight Black dads, and just documenting our culture like this. I think these things are beautiful, and the intention behind it is what took it from just an ordinary photo to my eyes art. So yeah, I absolutely feel it is my duty, because as a Black photographer, if I don't capture these stories, I'm leaving it up to someone outside of our culture to hopefully capture them, hopefully tell them the right way. And if you leave things to chance, then whatever happens is on you.
Yeah, I feel like it's very powerful and important for Black artists and Black people to tell our stories in our community. So thank you for doing that. Being a photographer, I feel like requires a lot of vulnerability between you and the poser. So can you speak on your approach of taking photographs of people in your community and maybe some of the relationships that you've gained from the people in these photographs or outside of them?
Certainly. When approaching anyone, especially maybe, let's say, a public setting, if you're taking what is known as like street photography or something of that nature, obviously if it's something from afar, then, you're just kind of taking the photo. Like if you're taking something from, across the street or something of that nature. But when it's something intimate, up close and personal, I'll just, introduce myself to the individual, let them know I'm a photographer and what drew me to want to take their photograph. You know, more oftentimes, definitely in like that kind of setting, people will be open to it. It's more of the environments when you would think people would know a photographer is going to be there, and maybe when someone was hired where people don't want to take pictures. Like, you know, prime example, you could be at let's say a business event, and you know you're taking photos, and you know it's still the same approach. Like in that instance, it's not me really. Let's say I found something unique about you to want to take your photo. Like, no, I want to take it because you're here, and you know whoever hired me, they want to document everything that's going on. So you know, I would ask, hey, would you mind if I take your photo? And it's like a 50-50 shot. Plenty of people just say, oh no, not today. Like I said, so but. For these particular photographs, basically it's again some where the subject may not know I'm taking the photo, like the children on skates and things of that nature. That was actually at Fresh Fest a few years ago. So that was kind of how that took place at Riddall Farms. But yeah, and there were plenty of pictures like Lil Mike, who's a focal point of this exhibition with two different pieces where, you know, him and I had a conversation. I had bumped into him before. The area I was in was on 105, and I was particularly at Comfort CLE, and he was there previously, and I'd seen him, so I kind of knew that he was, you know, a neighborhood kid. And again, I saw him this one particular day when I was there, and everything about him just really spoke to me as just a little black boy, the innocence that he still had, and just, you know, being, you know, once a little black boy, just knowing what that carefree felt like, you know, in the summer, and how he was just ripping and running the streets. So we had a brief conversation, and, you know, I gave him a couple dollars to send him on his way to help with his day for his corner store trips. But yeah, asked him would he be fine with me taking his picture, explained to him why I was taking it, because especially, you know, it's not really common for me to approach a child, but again, we had seen each other multiple times, and again, something about his spirit really just spoke to me that day. So, you know, basically I'm like, I'll approach him, let him know, hey, I'm not a creep. It's not stranger danger. And if you are uncomfortable, please let me know that. But he was super cool, and I kind of got the gist, you know, he was, not that he didn't have parents or anything like that, but that, you know, he was used to kind of maybe, let's say, holding his own, running his community. So.
Did you show him the picture after you took it, or okay?
I showed it to him, and he thought it was cool. At that point, you know, he had already gotten some money to go to the corner store, so his biggest thing was, you know, going to get his snacks. Like, he was interested in it, but it really didn't blow him away or anything like that. He was very nonchalant.
That's cool. Yeah. I think it's really nice to see, like, children playing outside, especially with the times that we're in. Everybody's so connected to their phones, social media. So it's really nice to see kids playing outside still. You need that.
I agree with you 100%.
Even adults, I think we need to go outside and touch grass a little once in a while. So going down memory lane, you've now shown just a bunch of dope pictures in 2016. That was your first solo show? Okay. Followed by Street Dreams in 2021. Sincerely Us, which premiered at Mocha, Cleveland with MCHA. Then most recently Heritage, Don't Touch My Hair. And naming all of these sounds like book titles or film names. And I'm just curious, have you ever viewed your shows as like volumes, telling a story? And if so, are they told chronologically, or do they exist within the same universe? Have they influenced one another?
Yes, I've most definitely I won't say volumes, but they definitely live in the same universe. Again, the big universe being our culture. So it's not a fictional universe. They're not in particular order. I think it's all on the inspiration of when I wanted to tell these stories. I felt like up until this point, I've told enough of the rawness of our culture and sometimes the sad parts. I wanted this to be more of really, as you see, about childhood and just about those feel-good moments. I didn't want anything in here, at least intentionally, traumatic or any of that. Because, you know, Sincerely Us, that was my biggest body of work with, I think, around 50 photographs. There was no mixed media. It was just all photography, but it was the good and it was the, you know, and it was the bad. I had, you know, business owners, the black business owners that I documented to, let's call them street guys. I actually had, children and, mothers. And then I also had, photos of a father and a son, kind of in protest that I took this photo right when everything happened with George Floyd. So it was still very fresh, very raw. I shared with them, what was going on and what the purpose of this photo shoot was for, and they actually wanted to do that on their own. Like the photo shoot wasn't. I didn't call them there and say, "Hey, let's take a stand for George Floyd." If I was doing something like that, it honestly might have been more of a series. But no, this was just one of my Father's Day shoots that I was mentioning to you. It happened around the same time that annual shoot came up. And they did that basically. And, when that exhibition came about, I shared with them that, I wanted to share that within that exhibition. But yeah, I definitely think to not drift off of the subject, all of these stories live in the same universe. They're not chronological, but they're all related because again, my overarching, kind of passion for, taking photographies and taking photographs and especially putting together a body of work is always thus far been highlighting our culture.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Black Fatherhood project that you started? Are you still doing that?
I actually stopped a few years ago. It was really just kind of unorganic. It wasn't for a particular reason. It did stop, I think, at the 5th year, which was kind of symbolic. Where I'm like, okay, I've done it for 5 years now. And that was, was really it. I definitely still feel that I highlight the Black father in even still my, business dealings as per se. There's plenty of dads who call me specifically for Father's Day shoots and things of that nature. So I get a lot of that. But yes, it was called the More Than a Day Project. And again, going back to your, I think, very first question, it all birthed from me feeling like, hey, I have a duty to kind of document that, the narrative has changed. It's not, absent Black dads and, oh, they run off on their kids. Like, does it still happen? Absolutely, I'm sure. Is it, unfortunate? Absolutely. But if I can, paint the picture basically that, yeah, that still exists, but there's a lot of amazing fathers, then I felt it was my duty to do that. And I know, so it wasn't hard. I didn't have to put out an open call. I didn't have to ask people. Like, I literally just reached out to, and it grew over the years. It started out with, I think, 8 dads. It grew to one point maybe around 20, and I had to rent a bigger space for me to shoot this at. But yeah, it was me just reaching out. So I'm like, this is so easy. Like, I know all of these dads. I did this totally free. There was no fee involved for this. They got the pictures for free. Only thing I would ask is that, they would use the hashtag to kind of spread the awareness and the visibility of the project when they shared it. And sometimes I'll be like, hey, let's all share at least one particular picture, like on Father's Day, because I would always do this so the pictures would be done before Father's Day. So it was a super cool, thing. Like I said, it just kind of stopped organically. I'm definitely not against, let's say, continuing it or bringing it back. It's not like it was a bookend. It was just kind of like, I hadn't did any sense. I would say the biggest reason, like if you had another question as to like maybe why, really just life with just things going on. And again, the facilitating of it. Also, I got to a point where I felt like I was documenting a lot of the same dads, which wasn't a bad thing, but I'm like, I want to open it up to more dads, but I also had a personal connection to the first handful of years, really all of them, even up until the last one. I knew that these were good dads. If I get to a point where I'm just asking somebody to fill out a form or I'm raffling it off, do I really know that you're, a good dad?
Or not? Yeah.
And then I didn't want it to grow. I was fine with stopping at 5 years and me personally knowing that all of these dads I've showcased over the years, whether you were a first timer or someone who was here every year, that you're a good dad versus, oh, this has been going on for 15 years, but sparse throughout there, it's dads who are not good dads. Like that was the last thing I wanted my project involved with is one of these photos going up and one of these guys getting blasted for not being a good dad. And I'm like, this is my initiative. So I was it was precious to me on how I actually handled it and how I carried it, basically. So.
Okay, so just talking about those shows and the projects that you've put together, you've taken so many pictures over the years. Why now, I guess, for when the streetlights flicker? Why were these images important to share at this moment? Has life and experiences impacted the timeline of sharing your work, or what's pulled you to releasing this?
That's a great question, and I'm super happy to kind of dive into it. So why this came about now is a lot of the mixed media work here was actually kind of therapy for me. And knowing that I was preparing myself for losing a family member that I actually unfortunately did lose last year in 2025, but I started the mixed media work actually in 2024. Like a lot of these specific pieces that you see were in 2024. I started the practice of mixed media, like screen printing, and that was literally where I believe it started in 2023. And then trying, different techniques and things of that, it grew to that. I got a fellowship at Zygote to be a proof fellow. And then, I learned so many more techniques and was able to create so much stuff. But yeah, the stories kind of started from there. I knew whenever the time came for me to have an exhibition with this, I wanted to blend in the mixed media pieces with photography. I even almost kind of had this title in my back pocket for several years because it's symbolic to me because being, a millennial, I didn't grow up with cell phones and things of that nature until I was in high school. So, the streetlights were my indicator that it was time to go home. Mm-hmm. And my mom, that was, her phrase, like, be home before the streetlights come on. So I kind of knew as it was getting dark, like it's time to head home. So all of those things kind of, I'm like, this would be, kind of amazing, basically. Like one of the Super Soakers, the pictures with the two little boys, that was one of the first pieces that I did. And although that didn't have anything to do specifically with, family and with the therapy, as I mentioned, it was the first, I believe, of me kind of getting into the mixed media. And then from there, it just kind of went to other pieces and me wanting to be intentional with like my grandmother's house that I had taken a picture of literally, I think, a year before it got demolished. So it was the demolishing of her house and knowing that an aunt of mine would be transitioning at some point. She held on a lot longer than, I expected, which was great. And in fair health, basically, she knew who I was up until the last minute. But yeah, I was really close to her. So again, it was a blend of me learning a new technique as well as when all of that, processing my grandmother's home being demolished that I spent so many summers and weekends at as a child, to knowing that, my aunt, who was like a mom to me, was, possibly not going to be here much longer. And she also lived in that house for half of my life. So it was a lot of memories tied into that and wanting to document that. And then again, the photograph element. Some of these pictures, I took literally 10 years ago when I kind of started my journey as a photographer. Some I took as early as or as late as last year. It was just what fit. I didn't force anything. And it was once I felt that I had, the body of work, I'm like, I have the space, meaning, where we're talking at now. And I'm like, I'm going to go for it. And it was also super symbolic that I was able to do this on Juneteenth. So, open it on Juneteenth.
Yeah, I feel like what you just shared shows like how our practice and as artists, how therapeutic it can be to work through life changes. So thank you for sharing that with us. And it's nice that you have photographs to remember those memories. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you
the
for sharing
photographs are so big. Again, that's why this is my calling, basically, because like I said, with that house, like, of course, I remember the house inside and out, practically every inch of it, from the basement to the third story. But taking that photo, like, I remember the day, I remember the car I was driving at the time, and just knowing that that was the last time you saw it, even though at that point it wasn't in its luster per se, like, wasn't terrible, like, but, it was, nobody had lived there for, quite some time, like possibly 2 decades. So, windows were boarded up, but again, it was for it to be a vacant house for, such a long time, like it wasn't a bando essentially, like it was actually still decent, but knowing that, that was the last time I saw it, like, that was special that I was able to take that photo. So, and to make it kind of live on in another form in the mixed media piece.
And I feel like coming into this space and seeing these images, people can feel like a familial feeling and feel a little comfortable, especially like this setting feels like a living room, like we're transported there. And I kind of want to talk a little bit more about space and this setting that we're in and in the work. I really appreciate the lights that you've placed over the works, imitating the street lights or store lights that are in front of like stores and different things like that. It's not really seen a lot installed in exhibitions, but I think the tones and their presence add another layer. And the living room furniture, as I mentioned, the film camera that you have passed down from family, right? Yeah. There's also another presence of family and the records. I think it's really nice to immerse the audience in this kind of setting. So, can you talk about aesthetically the choices around why it was important to create a living room space or people to feel comfortable when coming into the show?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, kind of a few questions ago, I've done enough work where, we had to, cry basically, or we had to be upset. I wanted all of this to feel good, and I wanted people to get the feeling when, they came in that it was, whether it was home, whether for me, a grandmother's house where I have all of these childhood memories, or whether it was an aunt's house. I wanted to connect everyone like with these, old school wicker chairs to the mid-century, table that I hunted for on the aftermarket. I wanted it to essentially just feel like home, and I wanted it to feel like, somewhere where the viewer, the visitor felt at peace. So it was all intentional with this feeling like a living room setup. Only thing I wasn't able to get was a rug. I didn't realize how expensive. And again, trying to find a vintage area rug, like I said, so regular rugs are expensive, but also when you're trying to find something that's 20 to 30 years old, it's a little hard, but yeah, it was all intentional. The lighting, I've gotten so many compliments on it, and I'm appreciative of it because I purchased and installed every, single light, and, bought them, whether one at a time or two at a time in these, in these packs, like in preparation for this. And hearing, you as well as maybe one or two other people mention like how it plays on the street lights, like that really blew my mind. And those little tidbits that I've gotten from visitors throughout, the open galleries that I've had, that's what's been most special to me. Because for me, when I did it again as a photographer, like the most important thing to me, to a photograph, is lighting. Like, it's not yes, if you have a $5,000 camera, you're probably gonna yield a better result maybe than a $500 camera, but it's not a guarantee if you don't know what you're doing with it. And one of those things is lighting. A lot of times it's not even adding external lighting, like, a physical lighting. It's understanding those settings in the camera. So the lighting here, I'll be truthful, I wish I could take the credit, like, oh, I wanted it to be like a street light over each piece. I think that's so dope, but I think it's a greater story with me admitting that wasn't the intention behind it. And it was really just wanting to adequately light everything. Again, with this being my studio where I work out of, it's not a traditional gallery. So I was very, I guess the word for it is not apprehensive, but just nervous, if that's what I'm looking for, is making sure that I presented everything in the right way, because I don't have track lights like most studios have, that spotlight on the light. And I'm like, at the level that I've presented my work, I couldn't, for a better term, half-ass it. So I'm like, if I put these lights over it, at least it'll, brighten it up. It'll give a great display. I made sure everything was even and level. Like, again, a lot of work went into it. And to hear the compliments that I've gotten on the lighting throughout it, it makes all of the sweat labor and everything that I put into it worth it. And to hear that it also lends to the title of, a street light. Like, I think that's super dope. And again, I wish I could sit here and be like, yep, that was, but I think it's way cooler to admit that was not the intention originally. So.
Yeah, it definitely complements the work, the title, everything. I think it was a great creative choice for sure, of course. So I want to talk about your mixed media pieces, On the Block, Granny's House, and Super Soakers. So On the Block is set up with a cutout photo of a deli, kids playing outside, a man sitting on the hood of his car in black and white. It's an angular composition. Diagonal to the eye travels from right to left, creating the illusion of a heel. And in Super Soakers, the figures in the piece are also in this floating space, or position. And in both Super Soakers and On the Block, the faces are made up of different pictures to create the features on the face. With Granny's House, no figures, but I'm drawn in by the plastic material. It kind of looks like a screen door to me or like a window. And then we see a repeat of those floating organic shapes in the background. So, can you talk about placement and movement in these works, the collage material, negative space, and how these works exist in conversation with the photographs?
Absolutely. So I'll start with, I'll kind of go one by one, basically, like with Neighborhood Market. Again, I knew that was one of the, again, earlier mixed media pieces. Like I made all of those mixed media pieces, I would say in 2024, like at some point, basically. So within, a couple months or things of that nature. And there's actually a lot of other works, but they just did not fit in the story I was telling here. So hopefully, something else for those basically. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that like particularly for Neighborhood Market, I didn't want it to be the composition of it like basically, let's just say a regular flat photo. And also that really stemmed from how I took the photo. When I take photos, I'll take various angles. I think anything specifically these photos that I'm taking, like to be a photographer and to call your work art, like again, it took a while for me to even be comfortable with, with that basically and saying that, but it's the intention behind it. And I also feel like it's how you take it. We both could stand in front of that, corner store, and how we take the photo is what's going to, doesn't mean mine's is art and yours is not. Like it's also subjective, but it's really, how you take it. And the final photo that I ended up using, again, from probably the 15 maybe that I took when I took those photos some years back, that was the one. So it also, the original photo sits at that angle. I didn't like edit it that way, but I purposely took it on that angle. I felt that lended a little bit better from probably the straight on one that I took, which I'm sure I still have somewhere on my computer. But it started from that. And then when I did it, I wanted to really play with, again, the perception of it basically. And I just wanted to add more life to it. And again, with all of the different kind of mixed media elements that you see, that's the best word for it, which all stem from photos that I took. So none of these are like magazine clippings or anything like that. Every little piece in there, from a street sign to the guy sitting on the car, the eyes and the mouth, like, yeah, all of those were sourced from different photographs that I've taken over the years. And I also was very specific in only wanting to source things from work that basically was my personal photography, and essentially if it involves people, things that nobody paid me for. Like if you pay me for a session, that doesn't mean, I can't ask you, hey, would you mind if I, put this in, feature this way or feature this that way, basically. But, you paid me for a service essentially. So I don't want to kind of, like I view those in different buckets, like having a business and then also being an artist essentially, like they're two so totally different things. So even the eyes and all of those things, I was specifically only sourcing pictures, again, that basically were like, when it's something personal, essentially, it's, like I do share these photos with the subjects basically. So they're free to kind of utilize them and kind of archive them of knowing, what they lended their time to, because, I'm not paying people for anything. Somebody's at the door. I'm not paying people for, for this. So I'm like, that's at least something I can do for, your time basically. But yeah, basically all of it kind of was photos that were essentially mine basically. For Granny's house, it was, again, that was the last actual photo that I took of, my grandmother's house before it was demolished. And I didn't know that would be the last time. But basically with that, it's a house. So I'm like, what other elements? And this was something that I created while I was a proof fellow. And the element that you're seeing kind of behind with the dots, that is actually a Mylar sheet. So what happened is basically when you're screen printing, for registration purposes, when it's like a multi-layer print, you use Mylar sheets basically to line everything up. I decided that I wanted to keep this Mylar sheet. Normally you just wash them off. You rinse them off and the ink comes off and you use it again. I'm like, I think this is cool for me to keep this and actually fold this into, the mixed media piece. Because I could have printed it, on a piece of paper and cut it out. If it was a flat canvas, like those canvases up there, I could have printed directly on them. But, I felt that was actually cool. And then I added the greenery, obviously, to reflect some grass. And then the red element was just that really had no specific intention. It wasn't like something next to her house that was red, or it's not supposed to represent necessarily a driveway.
Kind of looks like a door.
Okay. I could see, yeah, I just really wanted to add different textures and different elements. And then obviously there are the clouds. But yeah, that was really just me trying to find a way creatively to kind of basically play on, on the house. And then again, with Super Soakers, that is, all of these are special to me. But again, that's such a favorite from me. Again, being a kid who grew up when like Super Soakers like hit the scene basically, and having one of the original ones. That picture stems from a little boy I've known a very long time, since he was about 3 years old, his body at least, and my son. But again, even though that was at my house and it was, again, something that I shot on my own, nobody paid me for it, I still felt that it lended more for me to mix up the faces of black boys that I've taken over the years versus just using these two boys. So that was kind of how that came about. Like I thought, I'm like, if I use their bodies and I have the Super Soakers, and then, I did some other things on it to add different, textures to it. But that one, I thought that it was super unique and just fitting, basically, that it's just them on this clean canvas. And then there's oil painting for the water kind of coming out of the water gun, basically. But it's really the creation process behind this when I'm doing it is all in kind of, the story that I'm trying to tell. And again, for that, I really wanted them to be the focal point. And again, when I made that one, there were several series of mixed media pieces that I made where it was very clean per se, meaning like, and even all of these, like the neighborhood market, like that's still relatively clean other than me having these different elements on there. But that was just at the time when I was making them, the feeling that I had, like I want to tell the story, but it was big on the symmetry, big on clean lines and things being, taped off. Like it was just very intentional with like how I wanted the outcome to be. So
In almost all of your shows, the images are black and white, from what I've noticed. There may be a few photos with color, but the majority of your work has been presented in black and white. And for most people, they might associate that with like a historical image or dated photographs. So was it your intention to make these feel dated at all, or?
not necessarily dated. I'm big on black and white. I do take plenty of color photographs, but I just love black and white. There's something about it specifically that just makes it timeless. So that's part of it. And I think also when maybe like you're almost kind of maybe, I can't foresee, my lineage or my legacy, but when the intention of what you're doing, it is like, hey, I think about like how this may be viewed in 50 years, or like hopefully if I'm fortunate enough to make it in a history book or a textbook in, some kid's school. Not that a photo being in color takes away from that, but it's just something to me that speaks to a black and white photo. And it's not all of the time that I have the ability to present all of the work that way. Sometimes it just doesn't lend to the story, like particularly with heritage. I did have maybe a few black and white photos, but there were some that just called for, for color and things of that nature. So you can't always do it. A lot of my work has been in black and white, and I never really realized it till I looked back, but that's okay with me. It's just because I love black and white. But no, not anything is I feel like, oh, it makes it look older. No, I just think it makes the time stand still. For me, I really feel like that's what it does. Like you might still see remnants of, oh, that's a flat screen TV, or that's this kind of, it's a Tesla or something. Like, of course that didn't exist in the 70s. And I'm not trying to make stuff look like it's super old, but it's just something about when you change those settings when you're editing it, because obviously a lot of my work is digital. I do shoot film. That Granny's house was actually shot on film, and that was shot in color film. It was shot in Portrait 400, but once, I imported it and made it a digital file basically and kind of scanned it in, you can still make different, adjustments to it basically. But with everything being digital, obviously all of these photos started from color. Like on a digital camera, unless you're literally in a setting where it's like, hey, shoot this in black and white, which is a possibility. But when you shoot in RAW, which I shoot in, that means it's like that RAW naturally is like native in color. It's giving you every bit of information you can have to be able to edit it on the back end and get like maximum clarity, maximum definition, basically, highlights. So though, when you shoot in RAW, it's ultimately in color. So all of these photos start in color.
Okay. Do you look at the pictures as you're taking them and say, like, I know I want this to be black and white, or does that happen after? Or
Sometimes it happens after. Like, I would actually say I've showcased, like, when I say showcase, meaning like maybe just posted it somewhere or something like that. Eastside Market is absolutely beautiful in color. The tone of the sky at the time when I shot it, the colors in that sign, like, you know, the Pepsi, like, that's such a vintage, like, you know, Pepsi Cola sign. It's actually beautiful, but again, when I knew I wanted to fold it into this, and this was as I made the changes, because I definitely thought about this work being in color. Little Mike, the colors on that are stunning. His skin tone, like I said, as much as I love black and white, color is a huge, you know, deal to me. Again, especially photographing predominantly, you know, black individuals and being real big on our skin tones and making us look right and not washed out if you're someone who's, you know, of a darker color, or even someone of a lighter color, not making you, you know, super orange or super red. So I'm very intentional about the colors, and I definitely went back and forth on if it was going to be color or black and white. But once I decided that everything was going to be in black and white as far as the photographs, I put Eastside Market in black and white. But I said that to say the color photo that I took is beautiful. So
yeah, I definitely feel like it has a timeless feel because you wouldn't know. And I think maybe that's because of like some of the older architecture or structure of the buildings, but you wouldn't know if it was taken this year or like 20 years ago. So it definitely does feel timeless.
I will add that, you know, my favorite photographer, Gordon Parks, and so much of his work being in black and white naturally probably plays a part. Like, I'm not trying to mimic him, but I just love, you know, and even another photographer, Jonathan Mannion, he has a lot of amazing photos that were in black and white. Like, it's just something about a black and white photo. I don't know what it is.
And then I feel like you see a lot of street photography, and I'm curious, do you prefer that over studio-based photography and like
Not at all.
posing or okay?
No, I actually think there's a world for both of them. Like, in this, you know, kind of body of work, naturally it's really all street photography since it's stemming from being outside, the community, neighborhood. But in plenty of my other exhibitions, there's been more probably photography that was in the studio that had to be planned, that had to be, I guess you would say, you know, staged essentially, as far as like particular things. And like, we know what we're shooting. None of this was by chance, you know, like with Heritage, I'm shooting different type of hair. And because I'm, you know, intentional about this, I'm asking models to, hey, I need a really big afro for this, or I'm looking for Bantu knots, or, you know, something like that. So that's all super intentional. But no, I think there's a world for both of them. I definitely wouldn't say like pick one or the other or anything like that. I just think this body of work, there's not really much in the studio because it was all about being outside.
Right. Okay. So when the streetlights flicker is a signal to return home, it's a safety warning and something that was a measurement of our time when playing outside. And I feel like it's cool that every culture has a collective memory of traditions, sayings, and canon events that have shaped who we are. So I'm curious, what traditions have you held on to and practiced that your family started? How do you return home? And then what does it look like and mean for you at this stage in life?
That is a tough one. What traditions have I held on to? I would have to say probably maybe, you know, holiday gatherings, you know, visiting, you know, family. And obviously it's nowhere near the level it was at when I grew up. You know, it's just kind of really tapered off. But, you know, I'm open to that on, you know, Christmas and Thanksgiving and things of that nature. I wish I could have a better, like, example. But no, you know, I didn't see any of these questions going into it, so I didn't have anything in like my back pocket for that. But I feel like, you know, family is definitely one that, you know, I've held on to and try to make important to my kids. Like, even if it's something as small as like a birthday or something, of, you know, an uncle or a grandparent, like, you know, making sure that they reach out and, you know, like, hey, you know, it's so-and-so's birthday, like, you know, just trying to make sure, you know, because there's so much has changed from when I grew up and when they did, and, you know, just making sure the compassion is not lost. So hopefully that's a decent answer. Was there another part of the question?
And then how do you return home? Like, what does that look like for you at this stage in life?
Can you expound on it? Like, I don't think you mean like a physical home, like, oh, I get in my car and I drive home. What do you mean?
No, like home as in like a feeling. Like, how do you return home and like the feeling of it, the essence of home?
Wow, that's great. I think taking a lot of these photographs keeps me at home as far as that feeling and of my childhood. Like I live, you know, from here and like where I grew up, let's say 30, 35 minutes away. So it's actually more of, I don't want to call it rural, but 5 minutes around the corner from me, there are literally people who have horses in their front yard. And I don't live in the country, but it's people who are, you know, wealthy enough where like, you know, they have a horse in there. Like that really blows my mind. Like as I used to see that, like, you know, taking my daughter to and from dances, specifically on like one street. I'm like, they literally have a horse like people have a dog. And you'll see it grazing, like they just have a big enough yard, but like they don't look like, they don't have a barn or anything like that. Like they look like they probably get up and go to work every day, but they just happen to have a horse. So basically, I haven't seen anyone riding it. I think they may take it places and ride it. I don't know. The horse looks like it's taken care of, but, and it's also not the first horse I've seen 5 or 10 minutes from my house. So I say that to say my upbringing, you know, and I'm from Cleveland Heights, so like a suburb right outside of the inner city, you know, was a decent area, you know, when I was growing up, but it wasn't a suburb, let's say, like, you know, where my kids are growing up, where there's horses around the corner. So I think, you know, coming back into the community, whether it's for just regular routine travels or whether it's for me, you know, getting out, taking pictures of kids like Lil Mike, that keeps me, you know, grounded. Like so much of my life still revolves in, you know, literally the areas where I grew up. And again, my studio being in Cleveland, in the inner city. So I still think I'm, you know, constantly around it in a, you know, and in a good way. And even again, intentional when there's things that, you know, I want to, you know, get out and, you know, actually document or photograph. Basically, it requires me to do that. So I've yet to feel like, oh, I'm disconnected, or even the food that I enjoy. Like all of that stuff is, you know, right back here. So.
Okay. And you keep your camera with you all the time?
I try to. I have it, I say try because it was a lot easier 10 years ago when I first started. Basically, when you only have one camera, and I almost feel like, you know, the less you have, you might be more creative. Like now I have, you know, so many cameras, like, you know, it's 2 cameras in here recording video right now. Like those are mine. Like, so it's cameras for that. You know, the camera that I actually like shoot a lot of photos on because I knew I wouldn't use it today is not even here. Like then I have a small camera, like kind of dedicated to content. Like, so I have all of these cameras and I'm constantly documenting things for, you know, different reasons basically. So sometimes it's hard where I might have a camera for content, but do I really have a camera that I would be, you know, that I feel is worthy of taking a photo? But I always tell plenty of people when, you know, they ask me about how do I get started, or when people ask for tips, this day and age with these phones that we have that cost as much as computers now, those cameras are really good. I don't think anything in here has a photo I've taken on my iPhone, but I've taken amazing pictures right on the iPhone. The same thing. If you know what settings to kind of enable to really get the most from it, if you want to go back and edit it, which I absolutely would, you can take a photo app. So if it's something that I see that is like, I have to get a picture of this, I won't ever be like, oh man, I missed the moment. Like, no, is my phone with me? Like, which 10% I'm sure it is. I'm always gonna lean on that basically, but I do try to keep basically kind of what I would consider my everyday carry camera with me. Only reason I've drifted away from it because sometimes I'll look up and be like, I haven't picked it up from the console of my car in 3 weeks, and then at a certain point it becomes more of a liability because all of this stuff is so expensive. I'm like, I'd rather take it and put it on my desk where I know it's safe if I haven't even used it, you know, at all this summer really to take any, just kind of candid everyday photos in my travelings versus me leaving it at here and something could happen. Like I'm super cautious, unfortunately, just I won't put it on the city, like just everywhere. Times are hard, people are breaking into cars and things of that nature. So I don't want to leave it in there too long and to the point where I've forgotten. And also with this heat that we've had and those extreme temperatures can also damage your stuff too. So if you're leaving it somewhere that's constantly it's over 100 degrees, like that can affect it. Your battery can swell up. So many little different nuances. So you constantly have to really if, have it with you every single time, whether you're in or out. So.
But it's nice that you have your phone and you mentioned that because my next question was for somebody that was just starting out, like what are some tips that you can give to like photographers, beginners and children?
Certainly. So for someone just starting out, I would start with what I just mentioned and share with you the best camera you have is the one that you already have. Again, I'm pretty sure if you have a phone, you have a camera on it. Doesn't have to be the latest whatever phone. It's still going to be a decent camera. Like the cameras that they've been putting in these phones over the last 10 years has really, dramatically improved. And it's even people purposely using older, let's say iPhones to take photos because of the aesthetic that it gives. Like an iPhone 7 camera right now, it almost lends to film because it was only so many megapixels and it just looks totally different now. So basically use what you have, embrace what you have. And the biggest thing is dedicate the time to learn the basics. I would say if nothing else, learning lighting will save you dramatically. Like you can spend all of the money that you want on a lens and on buying this camera, but when you learn how to use what you actually have and you can maximize that, you'll be blown away when you see what you can do with your iPhone or with a $600 camera before you go buy a $6,000 camera. So it's never the gear, it's always gonna be the person holding it. And I didn't go to school for any of this. As I mentioned, I did take classes in high school for it, but I did go to college, I've graduated, but unfortunately my degree is not in photography or in the arts at all. I wish it was, but it's just in general communications basically. So, I said that to say, utilize YouTube, utilize different courses. But you can learn so much, like, just by YouTubing it, staying still and not, skipping through the video and, lean on people that you respect. Like so many people are open and approachable. Don't be afraid to ask someone, a question. And if someone doesn't respond, because, some people are busy or some people don't want to share the information, that doesn't mean everyone is like that. I always try to be open when people stop me somewhere or send me DMs. Like for me, that kind of keeps me going because so many people have told me how much like the content and the things I'm doing, even outside of art, is just like it's helped them. It's inspirational. So like you might really feel like, are people even watching these videos? Like it's so awkward talking to a camera and, sometimes I'm filming in public basically. And I'm like, you have to, really look past that and know that, okay, what's the end goal of it? Like if you're only doing this just because you want to look like this creator, then maybe you should stop. But for me, it was helping people. And a big thing was leveraging all of the stuff that I already buy and that I'm already doing into hopefully like brand deals. So I've already kind of had a great year, starting as I've really locked in this year and like, okay, I'm gonna be more focused and more intentional. And, I've had some paid campaigns like that I did not have last year. So it's, one of the camera companies, I'm not going to call anybody's name out and give anybody any sponsorship, but no, none of these cameras in here, they've not called me yet, but I just got to keep working. And eventually I know they will. So that was another thing for me too. I spend so much money on this stuff and I'm knowledgeable and, I make amazing content. I'm like, there's no reason that I should not be able to, get something sponsored from one of these companies or just be an ambassador basically. I'm like, I've seen other people do it. So I'm like, why would I be, exempt from that? And in the process, if I can help people who, follow me, which they've told me I've done so many times from just inspiring people or giving actual useful information, that's amazing.
I think that's so great and encouraging to hear because I feel like a lot of people, if they're interested in photography, it might feel intimidating, like you have to get a really expensive camera or you have to get all this fancy equipment. But I think it's nice to hear you talk about like access. We have access to everything that we need to do anything we want. If you have a phone, then you can go out and take pictures on the street. You can take pictures of your family, of your friends. You have YouTube. Like, we have so many resources available to us. So it was great to hear you to speak on that.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. We have so many more resources than, let's say, our parents' generation. Like, for us not to utilize it, it's really criminal.
So if you want to be a photographer and you don't have a camera, but you have your phone, you can get started on your career today.
Absolutely. If you follow me, I'm sure I'll point you in the direction of some apps that will elevate photo or video. Like, there's so many apps that, and not that you couldn't do it with the stock stuff, but there are apps that allow you to maybe take your regular camera into close to a film camera. Like, there's plenty of people who have shot full films and things of that nature right on, iPhones. Like, it's definitely possible. So if seeing these things and hearing it doesn't inspire you, like, I feel like that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, lean on your community. Like, ask the people around you questions. People can come up and talk to you, but I feel like people got to get out of their comfort zone and really lean on the people around them. So I think that was all of my questions. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for speaking on the work. I really appreciate all that you do in the community. Like I said, you've documented very important moments in people's lives, your peers. Me, for instance, I really appreciate you documenting the showcase and being part of some of my projects. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad to talk with you about your work today and just be in this space. So
Thank you so much, Bobbi. I appreciate those words, and I appreciate you, and thanks for the conversation. It was great.
Of course, thank you everybody for being here.
Yes, thank you.